Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Welkley. I'm the Product Marketing Manager at Blackbaud for Peer-to-Peer Solutions, and I'm really happy today to be hosting today's Peer-to-Peer World Virtual Conference. We've had 2 sessions already today with a ton of great content and really some good interaction between those of you attending virtually and the presenters. And we hope to continue that with our session now, where we're going to go beyond the logo, creating a brand with value, with Rachel Armbruster and Lynn Jennings. We're really excited to hear from our 2 presenters today. And since we're a minute or 2 behind our normal starting time, I think we're going to just dive right in. So I'm going to get a little housekeeping out of the way and then turn it right over to Rachel and Lynn. But I wanted to let you all know that this session is going to be recorded. So if you want to follow up on some points we discussed kind of on your own pace or after today's session ends, or we really encourage you to share this content with other folks in your office or peers who you might find this content really productive for them. Share the recording with them, and we can really have a broader discussion. In terms of a broader discussion, we'd love for you to participate in today's conversation as well. So you can use the question and answer feature in your console. Submit those questions in. I'll be moderating those, and we'll pose those questions to our presenters at the end of the session today. And feel free to tweet during the presentation today. You can use the hashtag P2P World, and we'll be following along, and we'd love for you to tweet out observations you have or things that you really find interesting along the way. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Rachel and Lynn. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Andy. We are excited to be here today to talk with everybody about branding and your peer-to-peer programs. I wanted to just say thank you to our conference hosts. I'm excited to be a part of the program, and even more excited to talk specifically about what we've learned with the clients that we've worked with over the years, and then also the experience that we've had specifically with branding for Project Hope. Today we have myself, Rachel Armbruster. I'm president of ACG. I started the organization in 2009, and we work with nonprofits all over the country of all sizes and work on things like their branding and their messaging, but also more specifically on their peer-to-peer concepting, program execution, and everything in between, and then also do a lot of strategic and fundraising development planning and organizational development. And I'll let Lynn maybe say a few words about herself as well, but we're extremely honored to be able to work with Project Hope, and Lynn has been an amazing client for us, and so we're just excited to share that experience with you all today.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lynn Jennings. I'm the Senior Director of Development at Project Hope. I'm excited to be here today and to impart some of our experiences we've had in peer-to-peer. Some of you may know that we embarked upon a brand new program a little over a year and a half ago, and a lot of lessons learned, some rocky steps in the past, but we've got a way forward and excited to be a part of this dialogue. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to jump right in. I think one of the things that I wanted to start with today is when we start thinking about the brand, and we thought about the topic that we wanted to cover today, and something that we get asked a lot from groups that we work with is kind of, how do we improve our brand? What's the value of our brand? Whether it's in regards to selling your peer-to-peer program to sponsors, or if it's presenting the brand to corporate teams, or even just how individuals, participants, your most loyal and vocal volunteers and advocates are relating to the brand. And so I wanted to start just with, I love this quote. I think it's really important for us to think about, it's not what we tell the consumer the brand is, it's what they tell each other it is. So it's not so much about what we are putting out into the world as far as our messaging and some of the other pieces that we can influence, but what's more important is to understand how is that then accepted into the community, and how are they sharing it with one another. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we can influence that, and how we can proactively increase the value of our brand. I also want to just stress the fact that when we talk about brand, this is similar to talking about the terms advertising and marketing. What really is included in there? What do we mean when we say the word brand? So we think of brand basically as a toolbox. It's basically all of the different marketing and communications methods that you might use to distinguish your organization from others. And that's also, the brand is something, just whatever goes into creating a lasting impression in the minds of our participants in particular, but also our donors, our sponsors, our corporate partners as well. So this could be everything from our brand identity, from the logo to the colors that we use, brand guidelines, the taglines, the basic kind of messaging that we use. But really, more than anything, if you get your brand right, it really symbolizes the promise that you're making to your participants, to your donors, to your sponsors, about what you stand for, what kind of experience you're going to deliver, what kind of work you're going to be doing. So the brand stands for much more than just a logo. As we mentioned in the title, it goes way beyond that. And it also encompasses not just the tangible, but also the intangible. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But this is really, if you think of the brand as a person, if you think of the organization as a person, the brand is your personality. It's what people think of when they think of you. It's how they would, the first three words that would come into their minds when they think of you as a person. It's the same thing that you're looking at for your peer-to-peer program. And I think there's also some confusion or always some debate on, are we putting forth the brand of the organization, or are we putting forth the brand of the actual peer-to-peer program? When do we go with each of those? How do they work together? And so we'll talk about that a little bit today. One of the things that I think is also important is not only that the brand should be owned by the community, and it's about that dialogue and exchange between members of that community that we're working with, and that audiences that we're trying to appeal to, but more important, when you're developing a brand, or when you're thinking about, does our brand need a refresh, I think it's really important that you realize this idea. If you've ever read the book Cathedral Within from Bill Shore, it's the same concept. We're here to kind of lay one brick, and the idea is we're building this larger legacy. We're trying to create a brand that is going to live way beyond any one staff person at an organization, way beyond any one rider or walker or runner. So you want it to be something that when someone introduces themselves at a cocktail party or at work, it's one of the first things they talk about. They can't wait to tell people. They can say, I'm a mother, I'm from Austin, and I volunteer with Love, Hope, Strength, and I'm very excited about the work that I do with them. You want it to be something that they identify with, that they feel like it's part of who they are. And if you've really created the right brand, then that's exactly what you'll start to see, even to an extreme in some cases, which we'll talk about in a second. There's definitely one of the other interesting transitions I think that has happened over the last few years for the peer-to-peer space is when regards to brand, organizations used to 10, 15 years ago try to keep them very close. This is our logo, this is our brand, and then there was a whole process of creating, benefiting the Lance Armstrong Foundation or benefiting Project Hope instead of really allowing people to utilize the brand. I think as social media and all of our abilities to really leverage existing graphics and things online, it's limited a nonprofit's ability to really control things that tightly. So it's even more important now that we put the systems and the processes in place to not discourage that, but actually to encourage it. And we do that a lot with a lot of our peer-to-peer toolkits with resources and graphics and guidelines, and giving them a little bit more leeway, again, on making it their own. And then it's really interesting to be able to watch how do people use it, where are they using it, what do they say around it, because that can really inform more of our, as an organization's, use of the brand as well. But an example of this, I didn't mention this in the beginning from my intro, but I did spend 6 years with the Lance Armstrong Foundation in the early years, pre-wristband, and then through the wristband. And when we were coming up with the brand name Livestrong, that was originally actually a program name. It was just meant to be the name of our website resource center. It wasn't until we partnered with Nike that we realized the brand itself, which we had put a lot of time and energy into, we wanted it to feel tribal in a way. We wanted the people to immediately feel like they were a part of Livestrong, that it represented this group of 28 million cancer survivors. And so having that brand and then having a really strong partner that helped us identify that that brand really is what we needed to hold on to, that allows you to go way beyond, again, just a logo or just brand guidelines or messaging. So we want to embrace the use of the brand throughout and put the systems in place. So sometimes there's going to be a rare issue. Sometimes you might find out that someone used that brand in a way that they shouldn't have, but you just need to be able to go after that and clear those situations up. But don't restrain the brand from everyone else, because that's where you can really start to see higher dollar amounts, higher average fundraising, higher donation amounts, larger corporate sponsorships, and the rest. The other thing that I would say is that branding takes a lot of time. You need to know where you're starting from. So, take a look at your existing brand and ask yourself, you can do this as a one-off exercise with just you. You can also expand it to your development team or go way beyond that with your sponsors, sponsor prospects, your board members, some of your key volunteers or key participants. And you want to ask them some questions about your brand and ask things about, what are the names that you use to identify our brand right now? If you could pick our logo out, or describe it to me, what does it symbolize to you? How would you describe it if you didn't have it sitting in front of you? What are the taglines or catchphrases that are mindful? What kind of other graphics go along with our logo? Some people will remember the wristband for Livestrong, even though technically that wasn't the logo for a long time. Just like for Project Hope, a lot of people remember the ship, and that's actually integrated into their logo, but it's something that we were trying to get away from when we built up their new peer-to-peer programs. You also want to ask about the different colors that they associate. As you know, like with Livestrong, yellow was an extremely important color to us, and with Project Hope, the color blue has been extremely important to pay tribute to where we started, but also to freshen things up and make them a little bit more relevant to 2016. And then also ask yourself, though, your brand is not just graphic elements. It's also things like, what sounds do you associate with the brand? What kind of tastes, if you thought of us as a food, what kind of taste would we be? What kind of, is it spicy? Is it, so really thinking about, again, this idea of if your organization were a person, how you would describe it and what you would think about when you think about that person, you want to do the same thing with your brand. And if you feel like you can't get a handle on that, if you say, oh my gosh, I have no idea what the taste would be, I know it sounds like a silly question, but if you don't know that, if you also think about the sense or the smell that you associate with your brand, if you can't think of, and you being probably the closest to your peer-to-peer brand, if it doesn't scream something specific to you, then that might mean that your brand needs some work. It might mean that you're not really sharing all of the brand attributes clearly through the branding, the marketing, the on-site event materials, your communications. So you want to really think about what message are we sending across, and is it touching all of the senses, and can people completely get involved and enveloped by everything that we are? Because you want them to feel all of this is extremely tangible. There's also, there's great examples too where the brand goes way beyond these graphics and other issues and just the naming, and goes to things like, if you think about an example that I saw not too long ago was Lamborghini. They have trademarked doors that swing upwards, the suicide door. So if you think about that car, you immediately think of that movement, of the way that that happens. And it's the same thing if you think about your peer-to-peer events. Is there something special on site that happens? Alzheimer's Association has the beautiful flower garden that people walk through now for the Walk to End Alzheimer's. So are there moments that you create at your events, at your peer-to-peer programs, or even through, say, your DIY marketing materials that really create a sense of movement and excitement and lets people know as much as possible about your brand? So as I mentioned, these are some extreme situations. So if in the past, nonprofit organizations, I think, struggled a little bit more. I don't know that it was as common practice for people to associate themselves so closely with a nonprofit brand that they would actually tattoo it on their body. But in this case, I look, the middle one being more of a for-profit example, and I think one of the things that has to happen in the nonprofit space, and has been happening for the last few years, is that we are taking our brands of not only the nonprofit organizations, but also the programs and campaigns that we run, the peer-to-peer programs, and taking them as seriously as the for-profit market when it comes to branding. So Harley-Davidson, for years, this is something that would not surprise anyone to see this tattoo on someone. But over the last, I would say, decade, we've started to see things on the right, like JDRF's logo, or on the left, the Livestrong logo, where people are really starting to embrace this as a part of their identity. So you want to make sure that we, especially if you are looking for large corporate dollars for your peer-to-peer program, either through team participation or through sponsorships, that your brand and the way that you approach it is on par with how your partners or teams may approach it as well. And then also, obviously not everyone in your group is going to be going out and getting a tattoo, but at the same time, if you reach that pinnacle, if you realize that there is a segment of your peer-to-peer audience that is doing that, then you can tell yourself, I'm on the right track, I know that we're doing something correct. And so you want to make sure that that kind of sets the overall tone and demonstrates just the full potential for what you're building. And I think also I just want to show it as an example of when you think about your brand, sometimes we put together these programs or these peer-to-peer activities, and we don't stop to think kind of blue sky and what are the possibilities and how far could this go and how important could this program become to someone. And so I think when we start to envision this, what if we build a brand that in the next 5 years we start seeing tattoos pop up on our Instagram feed or on our Facebook page? Then we know we've got something. Then we know we're moving in the right direction. And this is just one example. It could be everything from people just identifying more of it. They're doing some of their other large life moments, those kinds of things. But I think it gives us an idea of this is not just a peer-to-peer event program and you just have to come up with a name and you put it together and then move on. The brand that you select for your program is very important to the overall success of what you're trying to do. So the hope is through this presentation, we're going to go through quite a few things, but the idea is that at the end of this, you're able to basically say, yes, I have a brand worth partnering with. And that might not happen in the next 30 to 45 minutes, but our hope is that we equip you so that you can do the work that needs to be done on your side so that the next time you go into a corporate partner or the next time you're pitching a team captain, you feel truly like not only are you representing the event itself or the program itself, but the brand, that there is an essence there that you can say, I proudly am representing Hope in Action for Project Hope, and let me tell you all about it, all of the exciting things that are happening, and why you should find it valuable, why it's going to be of value to you in your life, whether you're talking again to a sponsor or you're talking to an individual. So the goal here is to really get you to a place where you can confidently say that. So we're going to walk you through some of the questions and steps that you may want to consider, either if you're creating a new brand or if you're revising an existing peer-to-peer brand. So again, this goes back to a couple of slides ago when we said you need to know where you're at right now. And the best way to do that is to start talking to people in your audience. And I'll give you some suggested questions. But be mindful, too, that there are going to be times when it makes sense as fundraising professionals where we're pitching or we're talking about the parent brand, we're talking about Project Hope, we're talking about Children's Miracle Network. But there's also very often times where we are specifically talking about the peer-to-peer event or the peer-to-peer program that we are trying to recruit or encourage retention. So there are times where your value proposition should be very distinct for the organization versus your peer-to-peer program. They offer very different values. They offer very different brands. So if you have the time, I would recommend that you take a few minutes to think about the brand for the organization, but then also the brand for the peer-to-peer program that you're thinking about or that you're already underway with. And then also, again, just be mindful of which one you're leading with. And also know they both represent different communities. Your larger organization brand represents all of those that maybe your mission serves and all of the participants, say, in your peer-to-peer program, whereas if you're promoting just the peer-to-peer program, you want to talk about the value and the benefits just of that piece. So the question to ask yourself is, do I have a brand that people and companies want to associate with? Are they excited about it? Do they answer my phone when they see it? Do they look at the emails when they see something come across their desk? So you want to take a look. One of the fastest things that I would recommend doing is taking a look at your audiences, your key audiences, whether that's sponsor prospects or it's individuals that you're hoping to recruit from, say, a specific social network that you know that if you'd like to get them as team captains, and then take a look at their profiles, take a look at the company's branding, and then match yours up to it. I've done this to, in a million different ways, everything from I'll go to all of the websites of the companies that are on my top 10 to 20 list, on my sponsor prospect list, and I'll print out their logos or the front page of their website. And then I'll print out the front page of my peer-to-peer program website, including our logo. And then I'll also go through Facebook pages of, say, our top 10 participants or the people that I'm trying to recruit as top 10 participants. And I'll print out a screenshot of their Facebook page to get a feel for what kind of images are they using in their header, what kind of profile picture do they have. And then looking at all of that, kind of spreading that out. You can either do that through a PowerPoint, and that way you can do some comparisons, but you can also just do this as a printout and lay that out and take a look at it and see, do I fit into this landscape? Does it make sense? Is it clear that I'm a part of this work or a part of this group? So you want to be very mindful of, is it complementary? Does it match, or at least is it close to? And then also look at the timeliness of it. If in some cases, the Project Hope logo, that was the logo from 1958. It still resonates with a very large segment of the database, almost all of the database for Project Hope, whereas we were looking for the Hope in Action, which is our DIY program, to really resonate with a much different group. It was companies that are trying to be trend forward. It was younger individuals, young professionals, young families, and so we needed to make sure that while we didn't want to change the parent brand, the DIY brand needed to pay homage to that, but also stand on its own and fit in with the groups that we were trying to appeal to. And then also, when you think about the brand, is it something that they can make their own? Is there some way for them to customize it? Is there some way for them to feel a sense of ownership with it? They can wrap themselves in it. They can see this as part of their profile picture. Does it make them want to be a part of it, and does it make them want to tell their story around your cause or share the cause's story? So your brand can also be really influenced by that, and how you move forward, whether you decide if you need to do some type of a refresh or if you feel like you're on point, then that's definitely a quick and easy way to do an assessment so that you know, are we on the right track, or am I maybe missing something and this could be impacting our final dollar amounts. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is, what are people saying about your brand? Now you've kind of done some external research, you've done your own look at everything, but when was the last time that you actually sat in and listened to your top peer-to-peer fundraisers pitch your organization to a donor? Have you read their emails? Have you looked at their Facebook posts? Have you asked if you could go along on one of their ask meetings? Have you talked to them about how they approach their company? And just listened. Because everybody talks about the organization a little bit differently, but if you can find out what your most vocal, most excited, most passionate supporters are saying about the brand and what's working for them, then there's a way for you to be able to leverage that for the rest of your participants, and also just generally for the organization when it comes to recruitment and stewardship. So what are these people saying to their donors? How are your volunteers talking about it? Do they mention, if you know that you have a very serious fundraiser and you happen to be in an off-site function for something else, and you listen to them introduce themselves for the first time, again, do they mention your brand fairly quickly after that first intro? Is it something that they connect to? Are they excited to talk about it? You want to make sure that the brand feels, like I said, that it comes from the community, and it's definitely different than what we think might look good in a 30-second ad, or the logo that we think is really interesting, but maybe it just does not resonate with the people that you're working with. I know that there was a logo design that got pretty far along in the path for the ALS Association for a program that they were working on, and at the end of the day, the key element and the idea of it was right, but when we started asking some of our folks about, what does this say about us? How do you feel about it? It was very clear that there was an issue there because of some of the limited functionality of patients with ALS. The image to them looked like two hands raised in the air, clasping, and they said that's really doesn't represent who we are. I feel like that's the exact opposite of who I am. So if you really take the time to figure out and listen to what people are saying and make sure that it's something that they can believe in. The other thing I will say really quickly about this is, don't be afraid if you get into a room and you're doing some type of focus group testing, or if you're pushing this brand out to a few new people and you get mixed reviews. Sometimes that's exactly what you want. Sometimes your brand has to be polarizing in order for it to really make a difference, in order for some people to really cling to it and be your most vocal supporters. So don't just shy away, and absolutely do not look for a brand that is so generic that it appeals to everyone. That's a surefire way to make sure that your brand has absolutely zero brand value to anyone, your sponsors, your participants, the donors, those that you serve. So it does need to be, in some ways, something that at least gets people's juices flowing, that gets them passionate, that you can start to see a sparkle in their eye when they think about what could it mean for them, how would they use it, how would they leverage it to raise another dollar, how would they share this information with their friends and family. The other thing that I wanted to mention just quickly on this is that we do have on armbrusterconsulting.com, we did put a one-pager there that outlines some key questions that you might ask the participants or some sponsors or even sponsor prospects that would give you some additional insights and start that brand dialogue. So I want to encourage you to take a look at that, and if you do nothing else, and I'll remind you in the key takeaways, but if you do nothing else, that's a really easy exercise to go through to see where does your brand stand and what can you do to maybe make it better, and give you some insights instead of trying to figure that out with a small group in your conference room. So the other thing about your brand is that obviously we've talked about it being owned by the community, but we really want to make sure too that you're giving an opportunity for both the individuals and the organizations that you're working with to have an impact on the growth of the organization by utilizing the brand. So when a company or a group is proud to associate with your brand, they can absolutely help define it and also give it context. So as an example, if you are, Project Hope did some work with Whole Foods not too long ago through a cause marketing partnership, and an employee got some employee involvement. If you partner with a brand like that, it obviously ties back to who you are and gives your brand even more meaning and context. So there are a lot of ways for you to build up your brand value that have nothing to do with what you personally at the organization can do, or even the marketing budget that you might have. But it's really a matter of choosing your partners wisely. So as an example, just thinking back to the Livestrong example, what would Livestrong have been like if we had partnered with an organization that really didn't have that same just do it, aggressive, athletic, empowering attitude? It would have set a completely different tone for the brand moving forward. So as you're thinking about your peer-to-peer brand, you really want to think about who are we partnering with and what message does that send? And if you pull all of your sponsor logos together or all of your corporate team logos together and you take a look at that, what message is that sending? Is that telling people a little bit more about who you are, and is it sending the right message, or do you want to start tweaking that and working towards a different goal? And then also, what do your partners have that you can leverage for your brand to help build it? So maybe it's that they have a really strong sense of history, maybe it's their community involvement, maybe it's that, like 3M, they're extremely innovative, and so by partnering with them, that gives you a completely different sense and brand attribute. So figure out what you can about their brand and allow those partners to help, and individuals. If you've got a ton of individuals that tend to be adrenaline junkies and they just can't wait till they find the next activity, that if you find those individuals to help serve as mentors or key volunteers or spokespeople or ambassadors for your peer-to-peer program, again, you're aligning yourself with individuals and companies that can really help fill the gap that maybe your brand isn't currently filling currently. So what is the value of your brand and how can you influence it? So we've talked about quite a few of these things already, but you can influence the value of the brand by demonstrating how it can be leveraged for the return on investment. So whether that's a return for sales, it's employee retention, it's meeting new friends, it's creating and expanding your social network, it's feeling good about yourself if it's something that you're doing, it's knowing that you're making a difference on a cause that maybe is very close to your heart. So knowing how do you value that ROI? So talk to those that, the best way to go about this in my mind is to talk to those that you've partnered with before. Talk to your highest fundraisers and ask them simply how it is that you can leverage the brand to raise funds. So, how are you using this? How does it influence giving? Do you feel like it makes a difference when you walk in the door and you say, I'm with Children's Miracle Network and I'm, doing this on behalf of Miracle Challenge? How much is that helping you? And what percentage of closing that donation or closing that sponsorship deal is the actual brand itself helping along? And then, what are some things that you can do to improve that? And then, again, looking at the quality of your partners, and then how do you activate relationships? Examples are things like the value of your brand, people's loyalty to the brand, and their willingness and ability to even throw out full-size products because maybe one sponsor stopped sponsoring the event program and a new one is coming on board. So you want to find out what is the loyalty of that? What can we guarantee if you join us? What's that value proposition of if you're a part of the Hope in Action program, then what can you count on? What can we promise to deliver to you? We can promise you that you're going to get to network and socialize with some of the top pharmaceutical and healthcare companies in the world who are also supporting us. We can promise you that when the next disaster strikes, that we're ready for our systems and branding and everything is ready to start capturing the donations from your customers and from your employees. So there's a value of time savings there, of being seen as a good corporate citizen, and we as an organization are able to fill that through our peer-to-peer program. So there are very different ways that you can influence that. You also, I would encourage you to test your brand marketing again. Do some of those questions. Put this in front of people. Ask them what they're thinking. But then also reach out to experts. You have folks on your board. You have volunteers. You have participants. Ask them. We're doing, I want to put together a small task force to talk about our peer-to-peer brand. I thought you might have some insights that you could share because you've used the brand to raise $10,000 the last 4 years, or because you're from an advertising agency, or because you and your family have personally been impacted by this cause. So I think you have a lot to say about who we are and what we represent. So definitely be mindful of how you can influence that value. And then also, remember, again, the brand does not represent the organization. It represents those that you serve and those that are passionate about you. So as an example with Livestrong, we didn't necessarily go to Nike and say, we have 50,000 names in our database and we have about 15,000 people participating in our peer-to-peer event, Ride for the Roses. What we did was we went to them and we said, our Ride for the Roses event is our pinnacle moment throughout the year where everything comes to life. But truly, the organization represents 28 million cancer survivors, and we're the voice for those cancer survivors. And same thing with Project Hope and Hope in Action. We aren't going to them saying we have X thousands of people in the database or X number of people at your event or participating in the DIY program. What we're saying to them is the reach of those individuals and their loyalty and their passion and their fierceness for global health care, these are the people that you're trying to tap into. These are your next ambassadors for your company. These are the people that could be your next best employee or recruit. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about the true value of the peer-to-peer program and not just thinking about it in very traditional metrics of how many walkers did I have, how much did they raise, how much time did they spend on the event site, those kinds of things. That's not going to get you to those higher dollar values, and it's not going to allow you to really leverage them to increase your revenue numbers. The other thing that I wanted to just talk really quickly about is, taking a look at what are you currently doing to raise brand awareness. I think a lot of times, we think about marketing and we put out, say, brochures, or we're doing some online social media marketing, those kinds of things. But where are we truly just generating brand awareness and being able to add value to our constituents, to those that are coming to the events, to their donors, to our sponsors? So what are those moments? So I think oftentimes people wonder why maybe you don't have higher brand awareness, but really stopping to think about and creating a list of what am I currently doing aside from my normal just recruitment tactics, aside from my stewardship and retention activities. What am I doing just to create a higher sense of brand awareness? But more importantly, not just the awareness, because you need to make sure that that's focused on the right audiences. You're not trying to have brand awareness to the entire maybe city or country necessarily. You may, depending on your mission, but you really want to understand what's my brand awareness in the audiences that I care about, and what am I doing to influence that. So whether that's social media, marketing campaigns with partners, emails to your existing database, acquisition, or other options, you want to make sure that you have a complete list of all of the different ways that you could access just awareness building and brand value building, and then see which ones are going to have the greatest output and impact, and then focus on those and prioritize those so that you have it delivering the needs, delivering the things that you need. So the couple of things that I wanted to just kind of key takeaways for me that I wanted to remind you all about are: be mindful about the sub-brands. One of the things that that I haven't talked about, but maybe when we talk about Project Hope we can get in a little bit more detail, and we did this with National Marfan and a few other organizations, is taking a step back and saying, okay, let's lay out all of your peer-to-peer programs, and they all maybe have different branding, maybe for your endurance program, your DIY, some of your signature events, or signature event series. So you want to take a step back and say, okay, how are these all tied together? For Project Hope, we tied them all together with a tagline, Make Hope Happen. And that allowed us, we did that through some different coloring, we did that through some similar messaging, we did that through the look and feel of some of the websites that we had been working on, but the tagline was consistent. So also thinking about what's the overall brand hierarchy, and then how do these sub-brands fit within the larger organization's branding and messaging. And then test out brands with prospective partners with their marketing and their digital platforms. As I mentioned, get online, take a look at what they're doing. Does your stuff match up with their stuff? You can't walk into an organization that is all about being hip and trend and on trend, and then walk in with an outdated logo or an outdated brand and feel like it's going to be a match. You need to make sure that you're thinking about the audience that you're building this for. And then again, understand how and why supporters identify with your brand. What is currently giving value to your brand, and what are some things that maybe you're spending a lot of time on that people don't actually attribute any kind of value to. And then determine how your partners can help you build the brand. None of us, or very few maybe, will have tens of millions of dollars to be able to build that brand awareness and to build that brand value. So you want to take a look at what can you leverage, either individuals or corporate partners, to help you build that. And then knowing the value of your current brand, and then if and when you need to make adjustments, and then effectively marketing your brand to attract supporters and to improve awareness. I think the biggest thing that I would suggest that you all do, I'm a big fan of, if you learn something, you have to do something with it in 72 hours, or else chances are you're never going to do anything about it. So my takeaway would really be to encourage you to take a look at the questions that we have listed on our website and start reaching out, listen, gauge what's happening out there in the marketplace. What is the value that people are associating with your organization? What are some things that are really helping that value? And then what are some things that are really taking away from it that maybe you can start to adjust and have an influence on, and will really help you moving forward? So with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Lynn so that she can talk to us a little bit about the branding case study that we did, like I said, with Project Hope to create their DIY program, Hope in Action.
Okay, so thank you, Rachel. That was a great introduction, and I learned a lot during that session as well. So, so Project Hope built out with the help of Armed Rooster Consulting last year, our peer-to-peer program from 0 to having 3 platforms. And so in this conversation today, we're going to focus more on our DIY program, Hope in Action. So next slide. Okay, so what we really wanted to do was to find something that was going to resonate with our supporters and giving them an outlet that would make them really feel connected to our mission and would really drive them to fundraise for the organization. So we looked at some testing within our current database, and of course we looked at many different options for how we were going to brand that, what was the type of message that we wanted to impart to them, and then how are we going to put it together and how are we going to deploy it. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. There we go, thanks. Okay, so we had an anniversary campaign. Project Hope had the anniversary of the first voyage of the SS Hope in September, and September of 2014. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to connect with our current database for a month-long campaign, and it would give us an opportunity very early on in this process to test what was going to work with our database, our current database of donor base of supporters. So we were testing that with the type of messaging that went out to them and the type of fundraisers that we were offering to them, ideas we were giving them for doing their own fundraiser during that month-long celebration of the anniversary. So we took that response and were able to analyze that and go forward with the knowledge that actually our current donor base was not going to be our focus. We didn't get a good response. We struggle, like many organizations, especially legacy organizations like ours, with kind of an aging donor base. So that was not going to be our audience. So moving on. So then we continued to do some surveys and questionnaires online to really understand supporters and where we could focus our efforts. And we really landed on our corporate relationships. Project Hope has very strong relationships within the pharmaceutical industry. We have, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 really strong pharmaceutical organizations that have been with us for years. So we thought that that would be a better way to focus our energies to try to get deeper into their employee engagement through a DIY program. So with employee engagement programs and just looking at ways that they could get involved in not just our DIY, but maybe our I Hope, which is our running endurance team, and our Day of Crisis, which is our signature event. So
one of the things I was going to add, Lynn, one of the things that I think is important to note about where we landed with Hope in Action, it's a little bit different from the way that a lot of programs are built, which is you build the program and then you take it out to the corporate partners to really pitch it and hope that they want to get involved. And in this case, we first went to the corporate partner. We went to those that we knew we wanted to have involved most, and we asked them, what are your problems? What are the issues? What's keeping you up at night? And we learned from them. They wanted health and wellness programs. They wanted an ability to activate their employees around specific causes that maybe they provided products or services around in global health care. They wanted, so we really learned from them, what is it that you are looking for in an ideal, not just necessarily a partner, but what are you trying, what would you maybe go out and hire a consultant to create? What would you be trying to create even on your own internally? And then can we use the peer-to-peer model to basically address all of those concerns and needs? And then that allows us a much easier sales cycle when we go back to those groups to say, you told us what, we listened to what you had talked about, we listened to what you need, and now we've built something that we think is really a platform that you're going to be able to leverage to accomplish a lot of those things. So it was a little bit different than, say, some of the peer-to-peer programs in the past, where it's very, this is the event that we're doing, or this is the program we're doing, and then we try to recruit and convince people that they should be doing it. In this case, we found out what are they going to try to do anyway in the next couple of years, and can we beat them to the punch and basically get this thing built so that they do it with us instead of doing it on their own.
Right. Good. I don't know what the next slide is, but I think we developed the Hope and Action campaign that was going to be the month of May. And it sort of fit perfectly into that because we were trying to connect the participants in the DIY for that month to people in the field. And that they would have a webinar once a week with someone from the field that they would have contact with and could hear more clearly just from the ground exactly the work that Project Hope is doing, and that they could relay that to their donors that they were going out to in their campaigns. And then Nepal hit, and we decided, we had our corporate partners all of a sudden were saying, we want to do employee engagement and raise money for Nepal to support Project Hope's effort in the disaster relief. So we then turned Hope in Action, which we turned that totally into our Nepal fundraiser with our corporate partners. And I think that the tagline that we had landed on was kind of prophetic, because it certainly was Hope in Action. It was something very real, something immediate, and something that they could get engaged in. And it was very exciting to see that come to fruition. So it was really a platform for them to fundraise, but it was a way for them to truly feel connected. So we were building the connection with the individuals that they could then go out to their friends and family and other coworkers and really get some buzz about what they were doing and the impact they were making through their partnership with Project Hope. So they were truly supported, feeling connected with our field staff, because we were giving our sit reps that were coming directly from the field were then being pushed out to our DIY people. And it was really exciting to see their reaction, and in real time they were able to see the impact of their dollars. So it became, of course, very relevant then, because they could see on a day-to-day basis the progress that was being made and the challenges. So we were very candid with them about some of the stories that were coming out, and some of them weren't always happy. But they could see how they were engaged, and all of these miles away across the oceans, they were making an impact on those people's lives.
I think the other thing, I was going to say, the only other thing that I would say is we were also excited about what we ended up landing on with Hope in Action. It really allowed us to go in several different directions depending on the participant, depending on the event host or the DIY participant. Whether it was a company and they were trying to actually get their team motivated to go overseas or to do something active that way and then use this as a fundraising platform. There were opportunities for individuals who, again, they felt like they could take ownership of this and put it into, it was very personal. It's my Hope in Action. So I have hope for Project Hope and the work that they're doing. I have hope for the people that they serve. And it's been something that has been really flexible for us as a DIY program. And then also, again, the logo, if going back a couple of slides, the logo uses the blue color of the Project Hope logo, but in a watercolor format. So again, paying tribute to the old ship, but still in a very fresh and new way, and something that all of the companies and the individuals that we've been working with really feel like it is applicable to who they are and the brand and the personality that they are trying to represent. So we know that we have honed in on the right situation. I don't know if you want to cover some of the key takeaways, Lynn?
Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. So one of the things, again, we had, whether you have a really strong individual event, one of our other peer-to-peer programs for Project Hope became Day of Crisis, which is a one-day obstacle race, kind of highlighting some of the disaster relief work that Project Hope does long-term when they go into a situation. But looking at the parent brand and how all of this ties together, we have still struggled a little bit, I'll be honest, with that older brand of Project Hope, and then how it connects to the peer-to-peer brands, which are a little bit newer. And so that's been a struggle, but it's something that we continue to overcome and work together as a team to figure out between the communications department as well as the peer-to-peer department. And then creating a new image and building a future, again, it's hard with some current partners, but it's been easier with new ones. And the reason that we talked about that is everyone that was involved in the organization previously, I think Lynn can attest to this, kind of had the old Project Hope mindset, and we were also always thinking about the old or existing Project Hope database and what would work for them. And that was the kind of crux of the idea for the anniversary campaign. We thought it would bring back great memories for people, it would get them motivated, but what we found was peer-to-peer in particular was not resonating with the audience that we had, and really what we needed to be focused on is who do we want to be, who do we want to attract, and then making sure that the brand and the peer-to-peer programs that we were building did exactly that. And then know that your peer-to-peer program, even if you're building it from the ground up, is obviously a great way to attract new audiences and is a huge acquisition tool, whether that's for major gifts, corporate, direct response, and the like. And I think sometimes we tend to think about all of these things very separately and try to keep our database very separate, and it's important to remember that the beauty of the peer-to-peer program could be that it really is a new way for new people to get to know us. It's a brand that gets out there a little bit more frequently, that people are talking about more actively, and so how else can we leverage that? And then also, we mentioned the tagline that was created for the peer-to-peer program, Make Hope Happen. Since that launched last year, the larger organization has decided that that is actually their tagline. So it was used in the gala event, it's been used in a lot of the direct response materials moving forward. And so your peer-to-peer space also, when you're thinking about branding, not just for peer-to-peer, but you're also thinking maybe our parent brand needs or our overarching brand or other programs need a refresh as well, your peer-to-peer space can be a great place to test some of that information. And so with that, I'm going to stop. I think we have 5 minutes to open it up for discussion, and I think Andy has been monitoring some of the questions that are maybe coming across, and he can fire away.
Yeah, we've got some lively discussion going on. Great content from both of you, and I really like, Rachel, when you pointed out when you share your branding with different groups, it's okay to get negative feedback. That actually is a good thing, and you're watching people engage with you at a very visceral level, and that's great, a great takeaway. And Lynn talking about how your brand is really active and relevant to people and getting it out there and using it in different ways. So some great insight and actionable things, and some questions that have come in. The first one was an early one, actually. And what if you have national branding constraints? What do you recommend for customizing the brand in the peer-to-peer fundraising campaign? And I know there's a push-pull, and we touched on the fact that your peer-to-peer could actually influence back to the national side, but would love to get your thoughts on the interaction between the two pieces.
Absolutely. I think that it's important, again, when we go back to think about what are all the elements that tie into your brand, and we start thinking about things like sounds, music, the taste, the sense, everything else that you can influence locally. So, as an example, you might have a national event that's going on, say World Wish Day. We worked with Make-A-Wish for a while on World Wish Day campaign and converting that into a month-long, more peer-to-peer specific program. Locally, nationally, there was national branding. We had a whole campaign developed. There were a ton of resources available. But locally, when you're going to recruit your companies to participate or you're trying to encourage people to get involved, that's where you can make it your own. That's where you can let people know a little bit more about the personality of your chapter. How are you engaged in the community? Do you like things loud? Do you like to be kind of more vocal about things? Do you enjoy a good party? Or do you tend to really be a little bit more conservative? So just the way that you present yourself through your media, through your talking points, everything from, I know this is going to sound silly, but I'm guessing that most of the people on the phone here, if you're a peer-to-peer professional, you've probably been on some type of a morning show on TV at some point in some small town. And so even the way that you dress, that's something that you send a message about what does the brand say for us here in our community? You know, the people that you bring along, again, who you associate yourself with and who you associate the brand with. Do you bring someone that's your key volunteer that, you know, is, you know, has 500 pieces of flair and pins and things like that and is wearing their t-shirt from 20 years ago, and they're demonstrating this is, you know, we love people that are completely devoted to us, and you send that message. So while you are all getting, you know, for the chapter groups that are on the call, while you might be getting from the national office your brand guidelines, your logos, all of your graphics, maybe some ads, sample ads, those kinds of things, there's still a ton of different ways for you to influence how your brand is perceived locally and give it that flair and make sure that it is part of your community and that it feels very grassroots and that it's something that everyone feels like they can get excited about and belong to, and not that this is a national group just coming in and kind of plopping down, but more that we have the power of a national group behind us, but we're still very local in how we approach our community, our customer service, our event programs, and the rest of it.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. But before we do that, Rachel, Kelly says hello. And the last question I think we'll have time for, and I think one of the answers is everybody's going to do this right when they leave the session today, but how often should you reevaluate your brand?
I think it's important at a minimum once a year. You don't want to get into this situation where you're in constant evaluation and then all marketing materials are held up or your website doesn't get done because everybody's still thinking about, is this the right logo? If you think about your peer-to-peer event cycle or your peer-to-peer program cycle and your budgeting process and those kinds of things, when you're going to need to have your new marketing materials developed, I would say absolutely something that you should be looking at every single year, because it does not take long for your brand to become outdated, for your brand to become irrelevant. So you want to make sure that, and it's not just looking at the logo. I'm not suggesting that you want to redo your logo every year by any means. And you may not even need to redo all of the surrounding graphics and the color schemes that you're using or even the tagline. So don't change it if you know, sometimes we as staff tend to get a little bit bored with the things because we see them 500 million times, but we have to remember that our constituents maybe haven't seen it that many times, and it's all about repetition. Maybe our sponsors are really invested in the tagline that we have out there. So I would really encourage people at a minimum annually to take some time to do some assessment of your brand, make sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to do for you, that it's helpful and not hurtful, and then determine if any action steps need to be taken. What timing is that? In some cases, you may say, we can see now that this brand is going to be irrelevant in a year or that our tagline may be outdated in a year. What's our timeline and our project plan to make sure that next year we're ready to go and we aren't skipping any, you know, we're not missing any time for our peer-to-peer programs. But in the flip side, you may say, we're fine, we don't need to do anything for another 2 years. I would still say every year, but even if you kind of have a longer-term game plan in place, it's good to monitor it.
Great. Well, if somebody does that evaluation, and Rachel, they want to reach out to get a little bit more of an expert opinion, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So we are, my email address it's pretty simple. It's rachel@rachelarmbruster.com. The other way to get involved or get in touch with us is to go to our website at armbrusterconsulting.com. As I mentioned, Stacy's posted up a couple of our materials that I mentioned today and some of the tools and resources that we use typically for these processes. So take a look at that, download those, and then my cell phone is also on the website, as is Stacy's and Laurel's and the rest of our team. So if you have questions, if you're going through your branding, if you get feedback from someone and you're like, I don't even know what to do with this, please feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help. We love talking about this. This gets us very excited and motivated and inspired, and we'd love to be a part of your conversation.
Thanks, Rachel. And Lynn, thank you for sharing your experience as well. I love to hear the real tangible ways that this plays out in the lives and activities of the organization. So thank you very much for your time today as well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be a part of it.
Great. And for those of you on the phone, thank you for joining our third session of our peer-to-peer virtual conference, Peer-to-Peer World today. We will take a short break after we finish up here. At 1:45 Eastern, we're going to be joined by Mark Becker and John Collins. John's from Parkinson, Canada. They're going to be talking about coloring outside the lines, creative approaches to peer-to-peer fundraising. And if any of you know Mark, you'll know he is the perfect guy to be talking about coloring outside the lines. So
Yeah.
we will be signing off here. If you want to join Mark and John on the next session, you'll log out of this instance, and there'll be a link in an email from your registration confirmation about joining Mark and John at 1:45 Eastern. So Rachel and Lynn, thanks so much for your time, and thanks to you on the phone today. We really got a lot out of this session today, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.